In this video, I'm gonna share with you a simple yet incredibly effective 30 minutes daily chess routine that's gonna boost your chess level tremendously. Remember, daily seemingly insignificant improvements, when done consistently, lead to stunning results. Hi guys, it's International Master Evgeny Aliseyev, and I would like to start this daily 30 minutes chess routine with this puzzle rush on chess.com. Just 5 minutes, but incredibly useful exercise to train your tactics ability. And I'm gonna comment it all along the way so you know a little bit my decision making process. It's gonna slow me down a little bit, but it's all about making it as instructive for you as possible. So let's go. And first of all, you're always looking for the checks. So the formula is checks, captures, and threats, the most active opportunities. So do I have any checks? If yes, you should try to calculate. If it's winning, then just go for it. If not, then look for a better move. Only if you don't have any checks, like here I have queen f6 and that's good enough. But if I don't have any checks like here, then I come to the second step, which is a capture. Here I took the knight and that was the right thing to do. So always in this order: checks, captures, threats. If you can't take anything and you can't give a check, then think about which type of a threat you can create for your opponent. So here, the first stats are normally all about the checks. Well, here I don't have a check, but I can just win this knight. Here I win this bishop, once again no checks. But here I have a check and that's checkmate in 1. Of course, if you see checkmate, you don't really think, just making a move, but otherwise make sure you're not blundering some stuff before you're making a move. Of course, sometimes you don't have the time for it, but that's always something you should try to do. Here we have a check and then we win the queen. Sometimes you have a few checks possible and that's where it becomes a little bit more tricky. Then you need to calculate the variations first and then only choose the best check available. Here it's a check winning the rook, so pretty obvious. Here we just take, that's the most active move, and we take everything that's what we can take. Here we have a checkmate in 2. Here we are taking the pawn thanks to the spin. Here we connect. It's always, bishop d2 was the right move, because bishop d7, sorry, because of queen a4. It's always important to connect more pieces to the attack. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. It's not really about that. It's about being consistent and train your tactics abilities. So mistakes is always an opportunity to learn something new for you. So here I have to take on b4, or maybe on d4 actually, because I have knight c2 in the end. If you have a few captures available, always try to think to start with a bigger capture. Like if you can take a queen and a knight, always start with calculation, what if you take the queen, and only then proceed with the smaller capture. It's a check for me, but if I take, he takes back. Maybe I can just go away, but then queen d5. I don't really get this task, to be honest. How can I... Yeah, okay, king g7, because now I take and I win the bishop. Here it should be bishop takes f7. Once again, notice that it's a check, so almost always this rule works. If not, then you just proceed with the next step. If you don't have any... Yeah, here I have some checks. Yeah, but the problem is there are a lot of checks and I apparently blundered. Maybe the queen was controlling that square. Here queen is here. How can I give a check? Okay, I don't have any checks, but I just take and then I have an extra rook. Here queen a2 seems to be a check, and then I win the queen. All with checks. Of course, sometimes you still make mistakes, but like I said, it's a way to improve. Here I just take everything and give a checkmate. Here it should be somehow this way, but knight f3 was another check and that was the wrong one, so you should calculate the variations before you are making those checks, if there are a few possible and you are not sure which one is the correct one. Here I guess I'm taking here, and then bishop So once again, here I'm connecting a new piece. Now I have 3 attacking pieces, and that's why I win. It's always great to connect more pieces to the attack. Should be checkmate somehow, but it's very difficult because there are so many checks. f6 seems to be winning, or maybe not, maybe queen d6. And then bishop d7, yeah, okay. So of course it's more difficult when there is a choice. This means that you must calculate everything. Should I take this one first? Don't really get the difference. Okay, then there would be a check otherwise. Queen h6. And we are winning a piece. Here there is a check. Okay, we have another check, and here we promote another queen. Here we should be able to win the bishop. And now rook a7 should have been the move. Yeah, so that's about it. I hope that was instructive for you. Now I'm coming to the next step of our 30 minutes daily chess routine. So now we continue with our 30 minutes daily routine, and that's the second step. Here I play a game on Lichess, 10 minutes game, but what's incredibly important, after the game I'm gonna analyze it, and that's the most important step in it, because when you analyze your game, it's the best source for your improvement, because you see where you made some mistakes, and well, you see some ways to improve your chess level. So I'm gonna also comment it all along the way, so it's gonna be as useful for you as it possibly could be. So I started here with d4, and it's a normal Queen's Gambit declined here. Let's see how we could play here. Seems like we are playing against a very strong opponent, but well, the stronger your opponent is, the more you can learn throughout the game. He plays here a6, preparing this d takes c, and then when I take it back, b5, and then, well, his bishop would be great along this diagonal. I could still allow that because, well, then I don't really waste a tempo with this, because normally white plays bishop d3 and then black takes, and then you're wasting a tempo. But this way the bishop will, if I play queen c2, let's say, the bishop will go to c4 in one tempo, which is great, but the drawback, as I said, is this b5, bishop b7 idea. Alternatively, I could just take on d5, but that would allow this bishop to come to e6 most probably, and that would be also quite good for black. So let me try this queen c2 move. I'm gonna allow this b5 idea if he wants to, but he plays knight d7. Well, now I can take, because the knight is blocking the bishop, so this idea doesn't work anymore. And so in this variation, this a6 move seems to be a little bit like a waste of a tempo. You can still play b5, but well, that would weaken the pawn structure a bit, because this c7 pawn would be a target. So I'm gonna just continue my development. Yeah, here I have a few ways to go. I can play bishop f4 and h4. The classical one is bishop h4, so I'm gonna stick to it. But it allows some ideas like rook e8 and then knight e4, that's a drawback. And then if bishop is hanging on f4, on h4, and if I take it on e7, then he has enough defenders for this knight on e4. He is doing it in other way. He puts his bishop on b7 and then tries this idea with knight e4, I suppose. But still, this a6 move feels like a little bit waste of a tempo in this whole variation. Because normally you just play knight d7, queen c2, and white takes on d5 at some point, and it's all the same but without this pawn. Okay, so let me just do the castles for now. Bishop goes to b7, and right now seems like, yeah, knight e4 is already an idea for black, because once again my bishop is hanging, and if I take, queen takes back, and he has enough defenders there for the knight. I can play knight e5, sorry, here, and yeah, trying to somehow be the first one to be active, and also this knight on f3 wouldn't be hanging afterwards. So yeah, let me try it. Now it seems like knight e4 shouldn't be that great because of bishop takes, queen takes, and knight takes e4. The only thing I need to be careful about, not to blunder after all of the exchanges, when my queen is on e4, Imagine my queen on e4, his queen is on e7, he plays f6, and now my knight is pinned, so I can't go anywhere because of my queen. But I have queen d5 check there, and that saves me this knight, and actually I also win in that variation. I hope it was more or less understandable for you. The point is, knight e4 doesn't seem to be playable here. And otherwise, if he take on e5 himself, then I just take it. Once again, knight e5 shouldn't be a great move. And if he needs to go back, then I can either go back as well with bishop g3 and protect this pawn, or I can exchange and play f4. Also playable in most of the cases, but in this concrete one, I would rather play bishop g3 if he takes and plays knight d7. Normally they don't play knight e5 that early, because when the bishop stays on on c8 there is knight g4 idea, and that allows black to exchange this powerful knight, because he can play f4 because of knight takes e3, and that would be a fork. So they don't play knight e5 first, they play h3 to cover this g4 square. But right now the bishop is on b7, and I'm trying to use this fact with my knight e5 idea. And if he doesn't take, well, I have already this f4 prepared, and then my knight would be just a monster there in the center of the board, and that's normally what white is trying to get in this type of positions. Okay, he plays c5, and yeah, it's gonna weaken my pawn structure a little bit, because this d4 pawn wouldn't be protected, but otherwise I still like the move f4, so I guess I'm gonna go for it. And then I need to bring my rook somehow, and maybe even this rook, somehow to try to attack this king on g8. It's once you play f4, it's one of the ideas. Maybe g4, g5 could be also on the agenda. But well, the main thing is of course this knight on e5, which is kind of cementing the whole position and making sure that white has the initiative here. As long as I stop this knight e4 move, he doesn't have well, anything to compensate the fact that there is this beautiful knight on e5. Or he should somehow put some pressure on this d4 pawn, but this knight should have been on c6. Then, of course, it would be much more difficult for me to play f4, because, well, I have to defend this pawn. But this way, when the knight is on d7, this knight e5 f4 idea is just perfect, because the d4 pawn is a difficult target for him. Yeah, he takes, and now it's even better for me, because I don't need to take with the e-pawn, with the d-pawn. I can take with this one, and then the f-file is opened. Although t takes e also makes some sense, because then I will have those f5, f6 ideas. The drawback is that he's gonna play d4 and his bishop will be great. And if I take with this pawn, I secure the fact that this pawn is on d5, which means this bishop will be very stupid there. So I'm gonna take with this pawn. I like all of those facts better. Yeah, he goes to g4, and I guess I have to take, because otherwise, first of all, I don't really need this bishop, because I have my pawns on the dark squares, and that means that my dark squares bishop is useless. It can't really be active. The pawns are preventing all of the possibilities for this bishop. And secondly, tactically I have a problem, because knight comes to e3 with a fork, and that's not really great for me. I guess his idea is to play queen takes e7 and then queen h4, attacking a checkmate, but if I go queen e2, for example, and he goes queen h4, I have just the move g3, and that solves the problem. So I'm gonna take it. And then queen e2 seems to be the most active move. Also relocating this queen a little bit, maybe closer to the attack, closer to the king side, because that's where all of the actions are going to happen. And once again, my best advantage here is thanks to this bishop. Look at this bishop on d3, a very active piece, and this bishop on b7, which is doing completely nothing, so that is why we have an advantage. And it can't really go away, because the pawn on d5 is vulnerable. So that's the problem he has, and the d4 pawn is very good protected. Okay, he plays queen g5, which is attacking the e3 pawn once again, but the problem is, I guess I can play rook f4, and I don't really see where this knight is going. Or maybe I even go, no, yeah, queen takes e3 is a threat, so rook f5 is not possible, that would be a blunder. Rook f4 seems to be the best move, then h5, yeah, h5 seems to be the only way to save the knight, maybe f5 as well, but that weakens hugely his position, and I still can play h3. And after h5, h3, he has knight h6, so that is the only way to save the knight, I suppose. But seems like I should still go for it. Rook f3 is an alternative, but I don't see any real difference, and this way the queen is still open, so I'm gonna... If he goes c takes d, I don't take back, of course, I just take here with a tempo. And hopefully I'm not blundering anything in this variation. Like knight takes c5, my rook is still protected, c takes d, I take here with a rook. And otherwise, well, h5, I could push this knight back. Well, maybe now he's kind of threatening the move c takes d. If I play h3, he takes here and I can take back. If I take the knight, he takes my knight, and that may be, yeah, not so great. So instead I could play rook f1, which is bringing another piece, which is always great. You should try to develop as many pieces as possible, and also protects this rook on f4, so that after takes I can just recapture with a pawn and not having any difficulties at all. Also, the queen is coming to f3. That was another way to continue, queen f3, because that would also attack the pawn, but it's still there as a threat. And this knight on g4 doesn't actually create any problems for me, and if I play h3, it goes to h6, where it protects the pawn. So right now I don't want to play h3, I want to play queen f3, because then I attack this f7 pawn 3 times and he has only 2 defenders. And also e6 would be on the agenda. Yeah, so I am pretty satisfied with this position. My pieces are much more active and I have some targets to attack. He could try something like rook d8, but still this f7 pawn is not that funny to deal with, because queen f3, e6. The drawback of the move e6 is that he's gonna play f6 and just close this whole thing, so I have to be a little bit careful with that. But still, it's always a threat. Also, this knight could be activated this way, knight a4, attacking this pawn, and it can't really move because then the c5 pawn would be weak. You can play c5 and then b5, but I will just go away and still this knight will be coming to c5, attacking the bishop, and it will be great there. He plays f6 himself. Well, I don't know, it weakens the king a lot. And also I can play h3 now, the knight will yeah, it has to go away, because if you take, I take there, and then the knight. And then I take on f6, rook takes, and you have to take with the pawn, and then, yeah, those pawns would be very, very weak and vulnerable. Also, I can play queen f3 first, because then I pin this pawn on f6, basically. So maybe that's a move. I don't see any tactical opportunities for him, so I'm gonna go for it. Also, I'm attacking this pawn. Of course, it's a little bit dangerous because this diagonal is going to be opened, but maybe in some variations it's gonna work because I'm threatening some discovered checks. Let's see what was his idea. If he does nothing, I threaten h3, knight h6, and then I win the pawn on f6. Well, he could play rook e8, trying to attack this e3 pawn, but yeah, still feels to be very dangerous. And maybe knight d5 would be an idea, because king goes away, I have queen e4, threatening checkmate, f5, I can just take it, g6, yeah, g6 maybe covers it, but then h3, rook takes f6, or maybe e6. No, e6 is not playable because I have to defend this knight. Okay, but well, knight d5 is one of the ideas, let's say it. Let's put it like that, and then I have to calculate it more properly. Also, rook f5 sometimes is not pleasant, because what do you do with the queen? If you go queen to g6, then yeah, the problem with rook f5 is I'm always blundering this queen e3, so it's not really a good idea. And if I play h3 first, then he goes back and covers this f5 square. So it doesn't work, but I have multiple ideas besides that. So what I like about this position is that all of my pieces are active. This knight is attacking. Yeah, you see he played rook b8 to defend this bishop so that after knight takes d5 I don't threaten any discovered checks. But I also have different threats like h3 here, and when the knight is going away I'm just picking this pawn. I understand that I have to exchange a lot of pieces when I do it, but the endgame should be... okay, I once again blunder this queen takes e3 with a check. Yeah, it's always unfortunate that in every variation when my rook moves and then my queen moves, I lose the pawn on e3 with a check. I can play king h1 first, just to make sure that there are no checks there, but somehow it feels to be too slow. Knight takes d5, king to h8, and then I always have to deal with this bishop with a spin, and I really like the fact that the bishop is doing absolutely nothing here, so I don't want to activate his bishop that way. I think the pawn is not really worth it. Yeah, so unfortunately I had some sound difficulty at this point, so I'm gonna just show you how the game continued from here. So I did play this move h3 because it seems like after knight is going to h6, then I play h4 and I win the queen. And well, otherwise he doesn't have any real opportunities because he can take on e5, the pawn on f6 is pinned, and so it seems like if I play h3 he can't really go to h6 back because it leads to losing his queen. And it also means that I could have played it one move earlier instead of queen f3, but still queen f3 should be good enough because it's cementing this pawn on f6, pinning it, and not allowing him to get any active chances. And now he plays knight h6, still this pawn on f6 is pinned, and now I have an opportunity to play h4 and basically win the queen and the game. So yeah, unfortunately for black, he can't really do anything because the bishop is controlling the whole diagonal, so the queen has no way to escape. And if you look at those pieces on b7 and b8, they're incredibly passive. If you compare it to those bishop on d3 and rook to f1, the difference is huge, and that's why white is actually winning. So he played queen g4, I just took it, and then my queen is hanging. I have two opportunities here, queen to g3 and queen to f4, and queen f4 seems to be a little bit more active because in case of f5 I have then an opportunity to go to g5, and if he takes on e5 I can just recapture it. Remember that if you have extra material, it's always great for you to exchange some pieces. Yeah, so I was explaining that if I went to g3, then after f4 I still have no real active moves except for queen f4, so I basically do the same thing but with a tempo less. That is why I played queen f4 immediately, and now after f5 I have the move queen to g5, and the queen will be very active there, and I'm threatening to take the f5 pawn. Also, my e-pawn is incredibly strong there, a protected passer, and it could deflect black pieces from defending, and then I'm gonna use this fact to attack the king. That was my idea. But of course, it all doesn't really matter that much since I have an extra rook, basically like a queen against the rook, and normally queen is almost like two rooks. And his bishop can't really move because the pawn on d5 is also hanging, so he basically can't do anything active here. Or even, yeah, just protecting the f5 pawn is literally impossible. Now I can just take on f5, he can play rook f8, pinning the bishop, but well, I have bishop e6, pinning his rook, and then this whole idea doesn't work for him. That is why he played rook e8 instead of rook f8, but now I have several ideas, bishop g6, but that runs into rook takes f1, so I played queen g6, threatening both queen h7 and bishop to e6 with a pin. he played rook f to e7, but the problem is it deals with bishop to e6, but doesn't deal with queen h7, and that's actually a forcing checkmate because the f file is now opened. The king must go to the f file, and well, maybe king f8 was a little bit better. Now the bishop shouldn't go to g6 because the e6 square would be available for the king, so I just need to make sure that this square is covered, and then it's a checkmate after knight to f5 and rook takes f5. So now let's look at the analysis of this game. As I have mentioned, that's the most important part to learn from your own mistakes. So I played as white, d4, d5, nothing special yet. Here bishop g5, the main classical move, e3, still the theory. Now he played a6, which I have mentioned a little bit, not one of the main lines here. Well, the idea is clear, somehow to take and play b5, but I played queen c2 and then he played knight b7, somehow combining two ideas here together, and now I taken advantage of that, and it turns out that the bishop is not going out, and also, well, the b5 idea would be not that great because it's gonna weaken the c pawn. Of course, objectively it's still fine, it's just from a positional point of view, you should try to have one plan and then stick to it rather than trying to combine a few, and as a result you don't have really anything. So I played bishop d3, a normal developing move, played h6, bishop goes to h4, and now he plays b6, which is also a typical idea in the Queen's Gambit declined to have the bishop on b7 to support the knight a4 idea, but once again a6 move here is just a waste of tempo, and of course time is the most important thing in chess, so it gave me some advantage in terms of having the possibility to play knight to e5 here in the center. Although the engine is not a big fan of this move, let's see why. So it says that black could take and play knight g4. Yeah, still, I mentioned during the game that normally there is such an idea for black to exchange the knights, and that is why white starts with h3 oftentimes and then play knight e5, but I thought if the bishop is not on c8 then it's not a problem, and I was going to play bishop g3. Okay, so you see that this position would be just great, almost winning for white, if not for one move here, bishop h4, and that justifies tactically this whole knight g4 idea, otherwise it wouldn't work. But unfortunately I don't have a square for my bishop to go, and otherwise he's still attacking this e5 pawn, and I don't have time. My main problem is I don't have time to play f4 because then knight takes e3 with a fork. So that is why, I mean, it's still a playable position, bishop f4, but it's not really what I wanted to get. So instead I should have started with something like developing new pieces like rook a to d1, always great to connect more pieces. I just wanted to make sure to get this opportunity when I have time, but apparently that wasn't the right, the best choice. Practically it worked out because he played c5, and now of course I have time to support my knight with f4. Engine also says that it's not really necessary. I could have just once again developed my rook. So I'm always saying, development is the most important thing in chess, so whenever you can develop a new piece, well, do it as active as possible. The engine also always appreciates it. So now takes, but now clearly white is much better, controlling here the whole center with a very strong pawn on e5, and also having a control of this f file, and now all of the pieces have the potential to be active. This knight is also putting some pressure on the d5 pawn, and look at this bishop, it's completely useless. I mean, unless the knight goes to e4, which is basically not that great because I just take it and then win a pawn. Otherwise the bishop is doing completely nothing, and in this strategy it just didn't work out for black. Now he played knight g3, but knight g4, sorry, but it doesn't work because I'm exchanging the bishops, and now I'm in time to protect this pawn on e3. And the e5 pawn is already protected, so I basically, comparing to the variation where black needed to do it, I won some time here. And that is why the position is basically winning, because black has no counterplay whatsoever. And I have this beautiful f-file, I have this target knight to attack, I have this very bad bishop, which comparing to my bishop is just completely useless for black. And overall my pieces are much more active here. He played h5, trying to defend the knight. Now rook a to f1. engine also supports this move. Well, now all of my pieces are developed. That always should be the aim for you when you play the opening, to develop all of the pieces as fast as possible and as active as possible. And now I'm already ready to create some threads. He plays f6, and now you could see that h3 immediately was working, but queen f3 is almost just as good, bringing the queen to the attack, now pinning this f6 pawn, attacking the d5 pawn. I mean, you can go wrong with that. And h3 is still a threat. He played rook b8, which is, yeah, it protects the bishop and kind of deals with the idea of knight takes d5 if I take. Like I mentioned during the game, I don't really like it because, yes, I win a pawn, but it doesn't really matter that much. What matters is that I'm activating his bishop, and, well, that gives him some possibilities, like you could see here, knight takes e3, and, well, I don't need it at all. I don't need to give my opponent counterplay. Instead, I should just focus on how could I use my initiative, how could I create the threats for my opponent without really giving him any counterplay chances. And so I have found this move h3, which is definitely not the only one to win, but the best move, because the knight is under attack, and if the knight goes away, then the queen is trapped. And then basically the rest is pretty simple. I just needed to activate my pieces, I needed to create threats for my opponent, and then it was too difficult to deal with all of the threats as he doesn't have enough material. And also this bishop, as before, doesn't participate in the game at all, and so it ended with a checkmate here. So I hope you enjoyed this 30 minutes daily chess routine. I hope it was very instructive for you how you can just spending 30 minutes a day improve your chess significantly over a period of some time, because remember, daily seemingly insignificant improvements, when done consistently, lead to stunning results. So hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to get even more educational and hopefully entertaining videos, and see you in the next one.